Oh, Colorado State. No, my ex does. She's the animal behaviorist of that. So, amongst the many.
All right, we're going to get started here pretty soon. Just want to look at YouTube to make sure. No, I don't want that. YouTube. Here we go. Descriptions. Oh, it's working great. All right. Did anybody see the news this morning that the crown jewels of France got stolen from the Louvre? Did you see this? It's crazy. And of course, I have to laugh at American reporting on it because they didn't. The headline that I saw first was not that the crown jewels got stolen. It was recording tourist outrage being kicked out of the Louvre. It's like, yeah. And of course, the BBC article or whatever, it wasn't a BBC article, was talking about the theft, but then immediately the next article was interviewing outraged tourists. And the first one they interviewed was an American couple. Whatever. But when I saw the headline, I was expecting like some real like high-tech stuff. Apparently they just got a ladder up to like a third-story window, broke the window, climbed in, grabbed the jewels, and got away in a moped. So
It's so French.
yeah, right. So we'll see how that goes for them in the long run. But one of the articles was saying the list of people that have the funds to buy the crown jewels of France is pretty small. So. No, yeah, that's not. Imagine that showing up at a state event or something like that. I have to thank my wife this morning because I spent a lot of time this week putting together a PowerPoint, and I was on my way to work and I realized I hadn't uploaded the PowerPoint to my Google Drive, which that's probably just, I'm speaking French to all of you. but she was kind enough to go follow my direction and go down to my computer and upload it so I could download it. Which again, I apologize for speaking what's functional foreign language. Okay, well, I'm waiting for this to boot up. Oh, good Lord. Download. There we go. Oh, good. It scanned it for viruses. So we're in week 2 of talking about forgiveness, and again, my original idea was to make this a multiple week thing, which it may end up being, but we're just going to kind of work through it, and we'll see where the conversation leads us. And primarily, I'm following a similar format to what we did with our study on strangers, refugees, migrants in the Hebrew Bible. We're going to look at our biblical sources and then basically go where the conversation takes us after that. Excuse me. But this is a little bit different because I feel like this is something that we applies to everybody. Is it working? Hey! All right. We're in business. And I have to give a shout out to my friends Anna Marsh and Ryan Higgins, who are both professors at High Point University in High Point, North Carolina. They are both doctors of the Hebrew Bible because I reached out to them this week. And I was like, hey, I've done some research on Hebrew language for forgiveness. Here's what I found. Do you have any insight? And Ryan was like, you know what? It'll just be easier if I send you some articles. And they were all encyclopedia articles. And I was like, oh, That's Ryan's very nice way of saying the stuff I found wasn't that great. Let's start back at the beginning. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But I want to just acknowledge them for being an ever-present and valuable resource to me and to you by extension.
What university is it?
Literally High Point University. High Point, North Carolina. It's just west of I will remember names of cities in North Carolina. It's in between the two big cities that aren't on the coast. Charlotte and what's the one to the west? Asheville. Yeah, it's kind of in between Charlotte and Asheville on the line there. It's great. It's a small town, but basically the whole town is the college. And when Anna interviewed there, she was kind of like, North Carolina, all right, because she grew up in Minnesota. They've been Minnesota, New York, and then back to Minnesota. She had never spent any time in the Southeast, but they love it. Having a great time, and Ryan has been able to get adjunct work there, which is huge for them because they both had very expensive doctorates in Hebrew Bible. Thank you.
That was Vanna White.
Yeah, Vanna White showcasing. By the way, if you haven't heard, the fall bake sale is happening today. So you're going to have the opportunity to buy all kinds of wonderful things. Actually, let me do the point of business first. In conversation with the council this week, one of the things that we realized is that, especially when there are choir Sundays, our choir folks have to skedaddle basically halfway through the study. And so we had tossed around the idea of moving this back to 9:15. Was that a tenable thing for folks? That would also give me more time to get from here to there, if that makes sense. I always think a half hour is going to be enough until I cheat into that half hour by 5 or 10 minutes, and then inevitably, need to deal with things on my way to the sanctuary. So we probably won't do that next week because I want to put it in the announcements for a couple of weeks, but I'll let you know when that's going to happen. Maybe even just do it. Well, we'll see. There's no reason to wait till the beginning of the year. Just I have to give everybody enough advance.
Do it when we fall back.
Oh, that's smart. When is
People
that?
won't even know. They think it's 45 minutes.
I think it's
Is it? Okay.
the weekend after holiday.
Okay. And I also have to make sure Jamie's willing to show up at 9:15 as well too. But I don't think that'd be a problem. Okay. Sorry. Done deal. Motion second. All in favor? Okay. Perfect. Okay. So here's the outline for what I'm going to talk about most of today. We might not get through this whole thing because we're going to be focusing a lot on the language that's used for forgiveness and how that informs the understanding of forgiveness that people in Jesus' day might have carried with them. Because as with all things, it's changed over time. The way in which we talk about it, think about it, the words we use for it, etc. And we're going to take a picture of forgiveness as a concept in the Hebrew Bible, and then we'll talk about it in the New Testament, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Words and terms. Look at my fancy PowerPoint. So, last week I put up 3 words for forgiveness, and I said, here are the 3 words that are used in the Hebrew Bible for forgiveness. And they were salak, kippurah, which is down there as well, and makala. That's not wrong, but it's a bit of a myopic picture of the concept of forgiveness in the Hebrew Bible, okay? And to be fair, I got it from a Bible study that was put out by the Orthodox Union, so these are a fairly reputable source of knowledge of the Hebrew Bible. But it turns out that the picture of forgiveness in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is a lot bigger, okay? And one really important thing that we have to know is that only God forgives, okay? Only God forgives. And this is a thing that we see in the story of Jesus coming into conflict. This is one of the reasons that Jesus gets into some spats with the religious leadership, is over that concept of who does the things, okay? But in the relationship of the Hebrew people to each other and to God, God was the only one that arbitrates that does the work of forgiving. And consequently, all of these words are things that God does. These are all words that indicate forgiveness and the mechanism of that. But God is always the subject of these verbs, okay? And in fact, one of them specifically, the second one, it's not knows, It's nosa. To bear or lift away sin is part of one of the divine titles of God. And when God is identified as a God of forgiveness, that word is used to apply. We'll talk about that later. But just walking through. If you remember one word, remember the word salah. Salah is the word that literally gets translated as forgiveness. So if you want to translate forgiveness into Hebrew, it's salah, okay? And it is God who does the salahim. But sorry, that was a Hebrew pun. All these other words are words that are used in varying degrees of frequency to describe the way in which God forgives. Okay? And you could think of them as either synonyms or parallels for salah. Okay? What I love about this is poetry in a lot of ways. This is a witness to the depth of literature, but also the depth of theology that exists in the Hebrew Scriptures in this ancient world. And I bring this up intentionally because I think so often we view the past as primitive, and we pat ourselves in the back for having written books upon books upon books of theology, elaborating on the idea of whatever it might be, forgiveness or eschatology or name your topic. It turns out that the Hebrew people themselves were big theologians and had a lot of ways of talking about the relationship of God to sin. Okay? And this is the other piece, is that you might notice I put in parentheses next to it, that it's to bear or lift away sin or iniquity. To understand forgiveness, you have to understand that the concept of sin in especially what we call cultic Israel, and that word carries with negative connotations, but we're talking about literally the cult of the temple. We're talking about the form of what we now call Judaism that existed during the time when there was literally the cult of Yahweh. Again, this is not to diminish or carry a negative context. This is the language that scholars use when they're talking about differentiating first century moving into rabbinic Judaism from the Judaism that's pre-Second Temple. It's First Temple Judaism. Okay. Sin in that concept it's an infection. It's sticky. Okay. So to understand what forgiveness is it's always a corollary to purification. Okay. In fact, all of these words up here are actually words that originate from descriptions for purifying things, whether that's a spiritual purification or physical purification. So to be forgiven is to literally have the sin, the sticky, corruption removed from you. Okay? And this is fascinating because it parallels how they did it. How they did the forgiveness, which was that there were literally, we talk about purification rituals, were part and parcel of mediating this process of forgiveness and atonement. Okay? And those are two different words, by the way. Forgiveness and atonement, even though we kind of use them synonymously when we're talking about it from the Hebrew context, they're very intentionally different things. Okay? And if I'm moving too fast, sorry. We'll get man, it's not very Canadian here. We'll get through it.
Could you just read down?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, sorry. So, my fancy PowerPoint has small print. So I talk about salah. There's nosa, which is to bear or lift away sin or iniquity. Okay? Come back to that. Rafa is a fascinating one. So Rafa doesn't technically mean forgiveness, but every time, well, not every time, but there are a significant number of times in the Hebrew Bible, in different books, where there's this parallelism where the author or the prophet talks about forgiving of sins and healing of illness, and how they walk right next to each other. So much so that when we talk about forgiveness, it's often a correlation with healing, Rafa. Okay? So Rafa does not mean to forgive, but it is so often used in parallel that it's an important thing to understand when we talk about the concept that those two things are going hand in hand. If that makes sense.
Can you have Rafa without?
That is the operative question, is can you have healing without forgiveness and vice versa? There's zakar, which is, and I like this one, to no longer remember. We might say forgive, but it's not an accident. When God no longer remembers sin, it's not because God is getting old. It's because God chooses to no longer remember, which is fascinating, and it's part of what we have talked about. You can forgive but not forget sometimes. But believe it or not, God chooses to forget. God chooses to no longer remember our sin or iniquity. And you might be hearing echoes of Psalms or different, quotations from the prophets as we talk about these, because this is language that is uniquely Old Testament. Tiher, which is literally to purify or cleanse. So if you purify or cleanse water, you tiher. You will find this a lot. Well, you notice both Zakar and Tiher are in Jeremiah. Macha, which is the wiping away. This is Mechala, which we talked about last week, is cleaning the slate. I use the image of the Etch-a-Sketch, and shaking it up, or you're actually using the mechanism that you're supposed to use to clean. This is the wiping away of sin. And then Kippur, from which we get Kippurat or Yom Kippur, right, which is to atone or expiate. And this is different, believe it or not, from forgiveness. Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll come back to it. And then there's Ha'abir, which is to make pass by. And again, I'm a nerd. Deal with it, right? I love this stuff. I love the visual, physical nature of it, right? So much of what we talk about with forgiveness is often emotional, spiritual. This is giving you imagery of what it looks like for God to forgive your sins, to wipe away, to lift off. By the way, when we talk about nosa, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, to bear, there's some competing concepts of what nosa means. So some scholars will talk about, well, it means to lift off, to lift away, but some will say, no, it means that God carries your sin. God bears it, carries it for you, which is fascinating. We won't talk about that specifically today, but it will come up as we work our way through some biblical texts. And then we move to Greek. Actually, let me pause there. Any questions or comments? What do you think about this word? Let me go back.
Is it Jesse?
Yeah.
Only God can forgive. Is it correct to say also the source of all forgiveness is God?
Yes. Yes. Well, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but what's significant, what's significant about this concept is that also the rituals themselves are not efficacious. In other words, the priests can do the purification ritual, but only God basically makes it happen, which is this idea that when Israel finds itself straying away from or corrupted, the priests can do all the rituals they want. It doesn't mean that God follows through. In other words, you can have empty separation.
Is there a concept of people forgiving each other?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, but it's different. Yes, Paul.
I was just thinking of why purification did not seem like a very important category for me as I think about ritual purification. But we are obsessed with purification and cleanliness. We just replaced a shower.
Yeah.
And I think how critical it is for Americans to have showers.
Well, critical for me. This is why I like backpacking, but I don't love it as much as my wife does. Because I like to start every day with a shower and end every day with a shower.
But she's French.
But she is French. Although French people wash just as much as Americans do, I'll tell you.
I was at Lowe's and they have a whole wall of cleansers, of cleaners, of products that clean, and I thought, wow, this is super important.
And I will say, as a guy, this is a different concept. All right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize until I got
I went to
married.
the guy's store.
Yeah, you went to the guy's store. What do you wash yourself with? Well, whatever, swab or whatever you find. And you ever go to like the cleanser, the soap section of Fred Meyer's, and the guy's section is this big,
Yeah.
and the women's section is
Huge.
yeah.
And then I passed a sign coming back from Andy's house, Happy Nails in Happy Valley. Happy Nails, wow. And I think, there's whole businesses around nails.
Oh,
And I look at my nails, ugh.
I have gotten several manicures and pedicures in the course of my lifetime, and if you have not as a man, highly recommend it. It's fantastic.
And so even
It
if we
is.
don't do this, that to hear in our minds as being that important, what is the female bathing ritual for after your period? What's that called?
I don't know if you.
Yeah,
Yes, I know what you're What's part of my research, Paul?
But anyway, it was like, why do they have this special, bath that they have to take? It's like, come on.
Yes.
What's wrong with your regular shower?
Well, what's funny about this too is we think of the ancient world, especially, making women bathe after their period. It's like, oh gosh. But again, who in our modern society do we tend to associate with cleaning more? Not just cleaning the house, but like, again, the women's section of the thing is this big, the guys is this big. Women, due to lots of things like societal pressures and whatever, are forced to, wear skin masks and all of these rituals that they go through to have perfectly pure and clean faces and skin and whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Not to mention the things that you're supposed to do with hair, which seem to have skipped the gender, although that's changing, I know.
Right. So I guess my point is that something that didn't seem important to me is immensely important to all of us.
Yeah.
And we don't acknowledge how important it is because we associate it with not just beauty, but youth and health.
Yeah.
And being germ-free or mitigating at least. And yet we just go sort of poo-poo it as, oh, this is an old-fashioned thing.
Yeah.
And don't realize it's obsessive.
Well, and I gotta say too, as a former brief chemical engineer, knowing that the difference between a lot of these products even is big. like there's hair conditioner and there's hair conditioner, right? And I can tell you, a lot of it has silicone in it, right, which gives you that nice, shiny feel, right? That was the stuff that I made. And if you want to be disenfranchised about hair products, I will show you what the silicone oil looked like. Before it had dyes and colorings and all the stuff that makes it look, it looks like oil. Yeah. And it sticks to everything.
But even the word to christen.
Yes.
The Mashiach is to, dump oil on someone's head, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oil, the original hair conditioner.
Yeah.
And literally, yeah. There was a reason, we're getting off the bit of tangent, that's okay. There was a reason that in the ancient world, people didn't shower or clean as much. If you wanted clean hair, you would oil it because it tamed it, right? Helped it stay down, but it also that was what people associated with having that fresh, men oiling their beards. I mean, people do that nowadays. I have beard oil at home. I have a beard like this.
All you have to do is go back to the 50s.
What's that?
All you have to do is go back to
The 50s?
when the men.
Real cream. Little Dabble D. I'm thinking of Oh Brother Where Art Thou, George Clooney. I'm a Dapper Dan Man.
Oh yeah. It was called Butch Wax. Come on.
Yes.
So now I'm really wondering why we think we're so different than these people.
Well, it's funny. I mean, this is remarkable as well too. Is that there was, when I kind of said it, there was not a distinction between the two, right?
Right.
Is that there were intentional correlations between the physical washing of your body and how that reflected your spiritual status as well too. Your physical health and your emotional health, your spiritual health were inextricably linked in a lot of ways. So much so that, well, you want to be cleansed of sin, you go take a shower. Both for the ritual and because it doesn't hurt to take a bath every once in a while. I wonder how many priests were like, they've got some shepherd that comes in and wants to be cleansed of whatever sin, and he's like, just go take a bath, man. you smell like the animals you hurt. Anyways, priest humor, first century priest humor.
You don't want to live downstream from the people who
are bathing. Yeah. I wonder. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to go really sacrilegious. I'm thinking about Jesus being baptized in the River Jordan. But yeah,
And then what, again, what do we do about baptism if we don't understand what they're talking about?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that a lot, right? Is that movement from the concept of sin and forgiveness has existed to the Judean people, and then what Jesus is saying that is either different or recalling these concepts. You know, Jesus does do different things, but a lot of what Jesus is talking about is carrying these concepts forward, right? So we need to understand this if we're going to understand what Jesus is talking about, right? As Christians, we tend to make a little bit too much of a big deal about, well, it's different under Jesus. Well, yeah, but Jesus was Judean, right? And so these are the concepts that he is operating with.
And again, especially the idea that Jesus replaces
Yes.
instead of magnifies.
Yes.
intensifies.
Yeah, that's another
Yeah.
to say sin of Christianity is that replacement theory of Jesus. It's like, no, he wasn't replacing, he was reforming. But magnifying, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments about any of these words? Jim?
As far as the cleansing, if you're from Finland, before birth,
Oh.
before marriage, before death.
Sauna.
The sauna.
Yeah.
Saunas are holy.
Sauna,
Yeah.
sometimes with the scraper, right? Yeah.
Birch branch.
Birch bark, yeah, birch branch, yeah. And then, as I experienced it in the UP when I was up there, is the sauna, and then immediately into the frozen pond or lake. Yeah. Did I tell the story? When I worked at Bible camp one summer, the guy that was the camp pastor, he was a seminarian at Wartburg, DJ Rasner. When he married his wife Amanda, he did the whole asking her dad for her hand, and her dad was like, well, let's have a sauna together. And DJ, not Finnish, walks in to find his future father-in-law naked in the sauna, and DJ was like, and that's an interview. Now we know each other.
Yeah, also don't forget, they didn't have soap.
No. Well, it was different,
They didn't
right?
have soap. They had oil, they used oil as a soap.
And scraping, we talked about that. So you sweat and then you scrape off the sweat, right? Yeah.
Or sand bath.
Sand bath, I was going to say, that was also another big piece of it. Okay, let's talk about Greek stuff. So similarly, I held up the one word aphiemi last week. That still holds true. Similar to salah. I was like, good Lord, my brain. Aphiemi is the word that you're going to see most often translated as forgiveness in the New Testament, whether it's Jesus or Paul that is talking about it. What's interesting, though, is that some of the authors of the epistles and also Luke start to develop, and again, develop might be a strong word. I'm not saying they invented words, but they start to use additional words in context with the aphiemi, which is charizomai, which is to give, to freely give away, was used often by Paul to denote the pardoning. And what's fascinating about New Testament language for forgiveness is it carries with it a sense of economy. It's often correlated with debt, which is why forgive us our debtors, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Right? There's a reason that that language exists in certain translations of the Lord's Prayer. Apoluo, similarly, is found in Luke as a synonym for aphiemi, and also connotes a sense to forgive debt. This is what's fascinating to me, is how the emphasis shifts from cleansing to the forgiveness of debt. And I'm sure some people have written papers and books on this, but knowing what I know, which is that currency and an economy of currency doesn't really enter the scene until the Roman Empire in terms of the life and the history of Israel. And my wondering is how much being a part of this big empire that is so focused on conquest and economy and wealth and power, how much that affects just the thought the thought of people, so much so that when they talk about forgiveness, they talk about being released from debts. Isn't that crazy? That's absolutely crazy to me. And how much so that carries into our modern understanding as well, too. When I was in Fort Wayne, I didn't teach it, my co-pastor Mark taught, what's the financial course by that one dude? Financial Peace University or whatever. I don't remember the guy's name. It was questionable theology, but fairly good financial advice. But I remember I sat in a couple of his classes. Dave Ramsey, that's it. Yeah, very iffy theology, but good financial advice.
For sure.
But talking to people who have not just thousands, but tens of thousands of dollars of credit card debt, over 8, 9, 10 credit cards, and my gut reaction was one of judgment. Partially because I don't know when I did it. I had to have had a credit card at that point. Maybe not. I mainly ran on debit cards, which is itself, right, evidence of the different financial upbringing that I was privileged to. Which is that my parents didn't have to worry about that because my grandfather gave them land, right? My dad didn't have to take out a loan to do this stuff. Any loans that they took out were through my grandparents, both sets, with no interest. So here I am, casting my gaze upon these people who, are just buried underneath a mountain of debt. And I'm like, geez, how do you let this happen? It's like, well, you use one credit card to pay off another credit card and rinse and repeat, and your income isn't matching your expenses. That's it. And it's not always that people are overspending. It's that their income has not kept up with the cost of raising children or having a house, home, and a car, and all these things, which is an economic reality of today. And I wonder what the language of the forgiveness of debt as forgiveness, what impact that carries into today's context, right? Where this is the thing, right? Where income is not matching expenses for so many people, and you've got kids, the generation below me that all went to college and pulled out hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, and they're going to carry that with them for the rest of their lives. The rest of their lives. How do you pay off $200,000 in student loan debt when you're making $20 an hour, $15 an hour? And that's if you're lucky to live in a state that has a $15 an hour minimum wage, because they got this fancy, they got this wonderful degree, but there's no work in their field because that job is being outsourced to AI now. That's a reality that Gen Z is facing right now. You can read plenty of articles about it. So I just wonder, I think about what forgiveness means, in that regard. Forgiveness of that matter.
I wonder if another way of thinking about this in first century AD terms is the concept of I do something for you.
It can be transactional.
Yeah, and the expectation is that somewhere down the road you're going to help me out with something else. It's not financial. It's more like helping out on the farm, and then maybe this winter I'm going to ask you to plow my driveway.
We are going to talk about that. Anyway, let's talk about that right now. So, forgiveness in a Judean context, right? God forgives, but human beings sin against each other, right? Now, God is seen as the mediator of that forgiveness, right? But that doesn't mean that you don't forgive. You absolutely do. This is what Yom Kippur is all about, which is when you have sinned against somebody, you go make atonement for those sins. You approach them, you acknowledge the sin, you repent of it, and they are required. They are required to forgive you. If you make public, so you do it in the presence of other people, if you say it at least 3 times, they are required to forgive you. And if they do not forgive you, they themselves are now the sinner. Yeah. And I don't know if that's what you're getting at, Matt, but you can be transactional. And it's not that these words are wrong, and far from it, but just understanding how this affects what we think about when we talk about forgiving somebody else. Jim?
do the words of Christ on the cross, I forgive you all, fall into any of these categories?
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Yeah.
Is can you pin it on any of these?
It's Alfieri. Yeah, I'd have to look it up. My bet would be it's Alfieri, just because that is the word. Well, actually, it's not. It's Elwe Lama Sabachthani, so it's Salah. But, well, it's Aramaic, so I'm assuming it's Salah. Anything else about Greek? And we're going to talk about things that kind of already talking about.
Once again, the concepts seem religious.
Yeah.
These are
Practical.
completely
Yeah.
everyday, personal, practical reality.
Yeah. Very practical. Very grounded, earthy, physical, connected to, yeah. Well, before I move on, let's just talk about that really quick. What are the consequences of forgiveness? I mean, not necessarily, well, in a divine understanding, but amongst friend groups or family groups.
Yeah, it's part of any type of relationship.
Yes.
I mean, between us and God or us and others. So Jesus says, to do what I have shown you.
Yeah.
So that ties into person to person, marriage, children. So it's universal.
And I would make that maybe a bold statement here, which is that if you don't know how to forgive, you're never going to know how to love. Because there is no relationship that you have had or will ever have that is not going to necessitate at least some sort of forgiveness over the course of that relationship, in both directions.
It's not forgiveness, at least understand.
Well, and then but this is part of it, right? Is that we kind of, I don't need to draw it, but we kind of like create this silo that this is forgiveness and there's all these other peripheral things. But I think what I'm trying to show is that no, that's all kind of part of that. That forgiveness is an umbrella. It's not a specific act. It's forgiveness falls into the whole picture, right? And it starts with something, right? And it might end with something, and there's a whole lot of stuff in between, but it doesn't even really end, because what tends to happen is there's forgiveness of this thing, but then there's the ongoing being forgiving towards the people you love, which is you both being transformed by the forgiveness that occurred in that situation.
Jesse, one of the things Linda and I ran into in this regard was our kids are in their late 40s, early 50s, right? And when they were younger, they would ask us they would tell us about something they wanted to buy, some big thing. And instead of our family's like your folks.
Yeah.
We did not want them going into these
that,
government or commercial lending institutions. So we would lend them money with the expectation that it would be paid back, and eventually it was. Now that they're older, we finally got into a place where we're saying, you know what, if you need an extra 10 grand or something, just come and ask us for it, and we'll kind of assess that and just give it to them. And so the idea of them incurring a debt to us has gone away.
Yeah.
Right? And it just makes it easier. We found it's just easier to say, just take the money.
Well, and I would say too, there's an evolution there.
Yeah.
Also, an evolution of your finances, perhaps as well too. Is that you once, and I don't mean to assume, but I've noticed that the older that Alana and I get, and as we accrue wealth and and have continued financial stability, is that we think less about money because we don't have to, and we're able to be more generous in that regard. And I know my parents were the same with me, right? So when I went to college, they made it clear to me that if you get a scholarship, we'll help you pay, which was their way. That was the carrot, right? Work hard in school, you get a scholarship, we'll help you through college, which I did. And it was great. And then even after I graduated college, up until I got a job as a pastor, my dad would tell me, yeah, I'll loan you some money. Guess how much of the loans I paid back? It wasn't much. But that was his way of saying, we have more than we need right now. We would rather you do that. But they were also in a financial position to do that. There are so many families I mean, we talk about wealth being generational, poverty is generational. What happens when your parents have debt and they die and the kids inherit their debt, which isn't supposed to happen, but it does. Susan.
A financial advisor referred to that as warm hand giving.
Warm hand?
Rather than waiting, you will inherit this,
Mhm.
we can help you along the way.
Oh, that's my dad, yeah. My parents were like, why would we wait for us to die for you to experience? If this is going to help you in the short term. My dad's goal is to die with net zero in his bank account. There will be nothing. I'll inherit all his woodworking tools.
Well, and just personally,
Yeah.
the way my husband and I worked it out with the kids, if they couldn't afford to pay us back or something, we found other ways or they found other ways of paying back, whether it be my son working on my car.
Yeah. Well, let me ask a question here too. I mean, not to stereotype, but I think a lot of us in this room are at the stage where we're not just worrying about our kids' finances, but our grandkids' finances. But how many of you in your family, in your culture, have the expectation that when things get hard for you, your kids or your grandkids are going to be there to help you out? And that would never be a transactional thing, but it's how we operate, right? Like we talk about the ancient world, how when you aged, you just moved in with your kids, right? That it was a household, it wasn't just an anatomical unit.
Yeah, I think that comes from modeling.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So you're being,
Absolutely.
what you're doing, not, I should do this. No,
Yeah.
it's sort of like what you were saying. I want to be part of my children's and grandchildren's
Absolutely.
life.
Yeah.
And to be able to help them get an education, and not debt, but I'm a part of their life. And I value that beyond anything.
Yeah.
So it's unconditional.
And as with all things, there are healthy expressions of that and unhealthy too, because I'm sure there are examples, I've witnessed a couple of them, where I'm going to give you this, but not charging interest, but there are strings attached to this stuff too. Yeah. Paul?
I'm just thinking of the opposite of this, is the only time the financial industry talks about moral hazard
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
was when they're worried that writing off bad debts is going to just
Tank.
beget
Yeah.
many more bad debts down the road. That's a real worry for a system.
Has anybody seen The Big Short, that film that was done about the 2008 housing crisis? It's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. It's a great movie. But there's a scene in there where they're explaining these subprime mortgages, which I'm not gonna lecture you on subprime mortgages today, but it is bleak. It's just the cynicism and greed. Like, just not worrying about the consequences of what this is doing to families at all. It's like, well, if these fail, we'll prop them up with, whatever. Somebody else will bear the consequences of this. We're not going to have to worry about it. But it's a great way to make money in the short term. Yeah.
And I maybe I'm wrong, but I think that a great deal of the huge siloing of messaging and political divide now is over this exact thing, that the left-wing liberals, whatever, is considered to be morally hazardous.
Yeah.
By the folks who are
Yeah.
concerned about keeping debt as an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And I really can't think of any other thing that's dividing this country as much as that. The idea that, boy, you're worried about taking care of these poor people. Teach them how to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And if they don't bail them out, you'll just make them softer.
Yeah.
Or you'll just pass it on to their kids. And I was like, okay, well, we both have good points here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about it because we haven't really forgiven each other for this divide.
We talk about the things that divide us. It's hard to find things that we haven't differentiated on, in terms of our language. But, there's a lot. This is a big thing to talk about right now. But talking about wealth, how it's managed, how it's handed on, and how that divide, does separate us is a big part of it. And again, I go back to, okay, what does forgiveness begin to look like in that? And can we forgive each other without forgiving debt? Without can we be forgiven as a people without seeking to address the irreparable harm that's been done because of the nature of poverty in our country? Can we ask for forgiveness, but and still know that there are so many people that are basically exploited, exploited by whatever, right? Social media, credit card. I mean, and again, I'm not casting a moral brush here, but just this is the big piece about this, especially with the Old Testament languages. You can't do one without the other. The priests can do all the rites they want to do. They can sacrifice the goat, they can wave the incense, they can sprinkle the blood on the altar, but if God says no, then nothing happens. That's the understanding, is that when you have become morally corrupt as a religious institution, God holds the right to withhold, which we're going to talk about withholding forgiveness at some point as well too. Yeah, Pat.
Well, if only God can forgive, should we even be using that word?
Well, and again, these are the idiosyncrasies of language, and let me talk about that right now. Okay, this is on this slide, and I'll dive into that to answer your question, because that's a really important question. Okay, just running through these things, I already talked about most of them already. Sin is sticky. I like this description. It's sin is a malefic force that adheres, and divine means are the only means of removing it. Okay, again, this is the concept as operated in the Hebrew world. I already mentioned that pretty much all the words that are used to denote forgiveness are corollaries to cleansing. Okay, God is a forgiver. Okay, this is a fascinating concept, because it holds this idea that only God forgives, but it's also holding this concept that that's who God is. like this is not, this is one of God's many job responsibilities. No, this is a descriptor of who God is that God forgives even when God doesn't want to. Sometimes. I mean, the story in Exodus with the golden calf and Moses arguing with God, and Moses saying, God, remember these are your people? God's like, no, I'm done with them. And Moses is like, no, you let them out of Egypt, as you remind me over and over and over again, so you need to stick with them. God's like, fine. And again, that story for me is a lot about also convincing Moses, right? Help Moses remember why he's leading these people. But Nose Avan Het Pesha is that God, it's a title for God. God is he who lifts off sin. Lifts off, Nose, removes it or bears it. Okay. And then finally, forgiveness is granted solely by God. Rituals are not inherently efficacious. Priests can do whatever they want, but God chooses to forgive or not forgive, and especially if the repentance seems empty or with contempt. Because there's the passive-aggressive forgiveness. Has anybody experienced this? Done this? I forgive you.
Yeah.
It's all right. I know you're not going to change. I forgive you. Does anybody hear the sense of disdain in my voice? But it's a scenario where it's a two-way street and you're trying to pretend it's a one-way street, where there has been harm done by both parties and you take the moral high ground, quote unquote, and you declare that it's all right, I forgive you. That's forgiveness with contempt in my mind. Yeah. Nobody here has done this, right? Okay. Just making sure. So, Pat, to get at your question. So, in the Hebrew world, the importance, there's several things, and I'm getting into the meaning here a little bit too. I'm interpreting that. The importance of this idea was that forgiveness is not in human hands because we can't always be trusted with it, if that makes sense. Which goes in line with the empty workings of the priest, is that because human institutions are as vulnerable to sin as human beings are, acknowledging that forgiveness belongs only in the hands of God is removing forgiveness from our grubby fingers, but also keeping it out of the possibility of it being used like in the manner I described, or using it as power over people. And I think that's a lot of it. Don't use forgiveness as having power over people, right? Do you guys have some stuff to share with us today?
Whoa.
Oh my goodness.
So should we, so we finished our thankful boxes, and we are going to put what we're thankful for from now until Thanksgiving, Christmas, whichever the kids decide. So Ellis, do you want to say what you're thankful for? We already put one piece of paper in here.
I am thankful for golden sparkle fine elephant.
Ellis, if you want to walk around and show everybody your box up close, you're more than welcome to.
I love the colors.
I am thankful for love to Jesus.
Oh, wow.
For my box, cute little simple design. The ladybug is definitely sentimental because when I was little, I was her little bug. And my thing that I'm thankful for is my cheerleading coaches for being the best people in the world.
And then we made one for MJ. Oh, so she can have it.
That's adorable. Are those pandas on that?
Yeah, I put pandas on for MJ.
Pandas are awesome.
It'll make her feel better.
Thank you, Ellis, and September, and Max. It's super awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
Oh, yeah.
I like those a lot. Alright, we're going to wrap up on time, so let me just work through my last two slides here, and then we'll skedaddle. Oh, actually, like, it's two and a half slides. As inward, so outward. So I already kind of brought this up, but according to the Hebrew concept, if you don't mirror inward contrition with outward acts, you're not doing anything, right? So when you talk about repentance, you can talk about, oh, I'm sorry, but sorry needs to be paired with actually changing your behavior. And there are pathways that this needs to happen. So in Isaiah especially, it involves ceasing to do evil, so you can't repent and continue to do harm, and then it involves doing a positive step towards good. So it's stopping the hurting and it's moving towards healing. So we talked earlier about Rapha being paired with Salah. So healing hand in hand with forgiveness. And an interesting word, shov. Have you ever heard this word used in?
An old soft show.
Yes, yeah. Is to turn or repent, and teshuvah is repentance. And again, patriarchal language, but this was the world. God is the forgiver, right? So God is motivated to forgive out of love. Israel's suffering is not out of retribution, but it's corrective discipline. And I have to not put an asterisk, but just be aware how this is used in abuse. Just again, this is encapsulating the understanding that these people, that these ancient people had with how God forgives. And you find this language in Jeremiah, you find it in Isaiah. It's that kind of tough love language, but understand how that is used in bad ways. But again, we're understanding here. We can talk more about this. God accepts the intermediation, or accepts mediation of an intercessor, right? And this is one of the roles that the prophets held, is the prophets were there basically as the mouth of God, calling Israel, calling Judah to repentance. And what is repentance? Repentance is stopping to do evil, and it's moving towards good. And we can look at any of the prophetic works and see examples of this. And then a lot of how forgiveness is understood, with specifically with regards to the Judeans, to the Hebrew people, is out of the context of the covenant. Okay? So God promises that Israel will last forever, right? That's the Abrahamic covenant. And if Israel is going to last forever, Israel is going to be part of God, right? Part of that whole shebang. And so, just as we talked about, every relationship is going to necessitate forgiveness at some point. Part of the covenant is God's promise to Israel that God will always forgive. That you can't maintain a relationship without that, right? And also, this is a really important thing, and we're going to talk a lot more about this, the idea of God's honor being at stake. An honor, an ancient term, but when we talk about doing things in the name of God, right, and we do harm, are we essentially are we tarnishing the image of the divine? And that's a big part of this, is that when the nation, the nation of Judah, the nation of Israel is harming their people or harming their neighbors, and again, this language, it's tough. It's the idea that God is angry because you're essentially bringing God into this fight. You're tarnishing the image of the divine. And that applies today as well, too. Okay, and finally, what about humans? So a direct answer to your question, Pat. So those who injure another human, and this is from the Talmud, by the way, are not forgiven until the injured party has himself or herself forgiven the perpetrator. So this is all about, I already mentioned Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, but here's the important part. Those who do not forgive, even when the sinner has come before them 3 times in the presence of others and asked forgiveness, is in turn deemed to have sinned. And more than that, they are termed as akzari. They are cruel. This is a title. And they are not children of Abraham because children of Abraham forgive. This is like some heavy stuff. Which is essentially saying is that if you withhold forgiveness, well, then God forgets you. You have proven by litmus test to not be a child of Abraham. And what this brings to mind for me is, I think this text is coming up next week, is Jesus talking to folks saying, or no, it's not Jesus, it's Paul. This is today's text, I think. You're claimed to be children of Abraham, but God is able to create children of Abraham out of the dust of the earth. That's nothing special. And I wonder how much of that had to do with this concept of being cruel. Whew. We can take some minutes.
Well, it's more to the point of our basic prayer, right? Forgive us as we
Have been forgiven.
Have been forgiven. In other words, we are a forgiving people. So do what we're doing what you always did. Now,
Oh, yeah.
do it again. And this is the nature of being Jewish, Christian, or Islamic. I think.
Well, this is gonna directly correlate to the gospel text for today. But there's this idea that if God is a forgiving God, are we not called to be forgiving people? Right. So we say we have faith in God, but if we know that God is a God who forgives, and we act transactionally, and we hold grudges and withhold forgiveness and act punitively towards people, it invites the question: are we actually faithful? Or when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on earth? Will there be faith among us, or are we just petty, manipulative, punitive people that hold grudges and come up with new and ever increasingly genius ways of tearing each other down. Who are we? And not to drag us into other stuff, but especially with all this conversation on concepts of the United States of America being a Christian nation, this Christian nationalism. And that's a sword that cuts both ways, right? So if we believe God is a forgiving God, is that behavior mirrored in ours? And nationally, do we want to hold the United States of America to that standard? Is that anyways. Okay, all right, sorry. Thank you, everybody. Next week we're gonna go and talk about Jesus stuff. We went over kind of the Old Testament concept today. Next week we're gonna look at specifically the understanding of forgiveness that Jesus is articulating and that Paul picks up and carries on, which is just quick word on that. That's something really important to think about too, is that there are 2 different voices articulating theology in the New Testament. Well, lots of different voices, but especially how do we hold Paul in conversation with Jesus as Protestants who love Paul. But there are different ideas that put there. So we'll talk about that next week. Thank you, everybody. See you in worship. Go buy stuff from the bake sale, please. Be patrons to our wonderful folks who put so much hard work in.